Hello and welcome to the Barbara Young channel. Now my next project is going to be a Kwik Sew pattern, and it is the Kwik Sew 355, which is well, a blouse or a shirt maybe. Well, actually it describes on the back here, Mrs. shirt has collar with collar stand, double yoke, optional breast pocket and shirt with tail hemline. I'll get to that in a bit. With view A has long sleeves with cuffs and view B has short sleeves, like you can see. Now this comes in, its size is described as extra small, small, medium, large and extra large. So the extra small, which is where it starts from, it has bust size of 31.5 to 32.5, which is 80 to 83 centimetres, all the way up to extra large, which has 43 to 45 inches or 110 to 114 centimetres, with a waist on the extra small 22.5 inch to 23.5 inch, which is 57 to 60 centimetres, all the way up to extra large, which is a waist of 35 to 37 inches, which is 89 to 94 centimetres. So it's got a fairly reasonable range. Back waist length, so the length of it in the extra small is 15.5 inches or 39 centimetres, and the extra large is 17 inches or 43 centimetres. So yeah, that's quite a nice sized one. Now there isn't any shaping detail on this, as you can see from the line drawings. Really it is just a pretty much a straight up and down. It's not a great deal of shaping in there. There's a little bit in the pattern, but not a lot. So really it's quite a roomy sort of blouse top. I've got the pattern actually cut up there and ready to go. So next stage will be cutting out the material, or marking it up, cutting it out and getting it ready to actually make this Kwik Sew pattern. The material I'm going to be using on this occasion is this nice blue, I think it's a Polycotton. It's quite a light to medium weight Polycotton. It's a little bit see-through, but you know what, I found that most of these sort of shirts, if you buy them from the shop, tend to always be a little bit see-through, so I can't see if that's going to be a problem. And I think this will work quite nicely because it is a nice feeling material. Yeah, I got this in a pack that I bought. I've already mentioned this pack before from Pound Fabrics, where I got a load of fabric, ended up getting a whole load in a box for about £5, and this is one of them. So yeah, it's not like it's going to be mega expensive, but I'm ready to go with it, so better get on with it. So let's get this show on the road, by having a look at the instructions. First of all, we need to know what I've got to start doing. Now, looking at this, I'm going to need all the pieces because I'm going to make a long sleeved version, version A, and there are 10 pieces, numbered 1 to 10, and it gives the pattern layout, how I should do it on the material to cut it out. So I think the first thing to do, first of all, actually, is to give this an iron. Now it has been pre-washed, just needs an iron, so I can actually have a look at where the salvage is and how I'm going to initially fold it so I can get my bigger pieces off, which are the you'll be able to see it on here very well, is the bigger pieces being the front, which I need to cut 2 of, then the back, which I need to cut on the fold, and then the sleeve, which I need to cut 2 of. So I'm going to need quite a bit there. I think they're the biggest ones, so get ironing and get cutting. Well, I've given my material a bit of a quick iron, and I found out something a little interesting, I suppose. This material to me seems like it's a Polycotton, and after putting the iron on it, I'd say it's more poly than cotton. Just got a feel about it. Cotton has a sort of glide, it moves well, the iron does, across cotton or even polycottons, but stuff that is really high in polyester content, like I feel this is, the iron has a sort of, can I describe it as stickiness across the material when you iron it. So I've got to be very careful not to have the iron too hot when ironing this, otherwise it's going to be a bit of a mess. Now I've cut out a piece just so it makes it easier for me to work with. I've sort of worked out what I need size wise and I'm sort of cutting the pieces out. Okay, I'm going to have a bit more loss of material by doing it that way, but I need to be able to get my piece on my worktop here to be able to cut it out, and with that much material draping down I just can't do it and keep it steady in one place. So this is what I'm doing to try and make it work. By the way, my material is 152 centimetre width and I've got, I think it was, I don't know, it's 2.5 or 3 metres in length. So I've got a lot of material, certainly more than enough to do this shirt. So yeah, better get on and get this pinned up, get this piece cut out and get onto the rest of the big pieces. But now that I've got everything cut out, it's all here, cut out and marked up, so it's all ready to go. And I've got my interfacing cut out. Now in the instructions, quite often it'll say do this part, do that part, and then at some point cut out your interfacing and or have your interfacing ready and then apply it once you've already started some of the construction. Well, I don't do that. What I tend to do is to get my interfacing and apply it at the beginning, so that all my interfacing pieces, even though I might not use them until say step 2 or 3 or even 4, I have got them all done. It also gives them a chance to settle. I found that if I do the interfacing and then use it fairly quickly, even if I leave it for an hour or two, it's still not quite settled. There have been times when that interfacing has come away from the piece it's on. Whereas if I'm able to put it on and then leave it for say a day, or leave it overnight at least, then it tends to settle more and it's less likely to come away from the piece it's on. And I just find it seems to sit better and be more settled when I'm actually sewing it. So that's what I'm going to do now, which is going to be torture because it's actually really sunny out there and it's gone really warm. It's really lovely weather here in the UK, which is a bit of a rarity, but we do seem to have a bit of a warm spell. But I do need to get this done, but it is at least the evening, so it's not quite so hot as it could be having this thing on under my face. The other thing I've got to be aware of is that as far as I'm concerned, I thought this was a cotton. I don't think it is. I think it's a polycotton with more poly than cotton, which is going to be a bit problematic because I'm worried that this stuff will just melt and then it'll be useless, and certainly don't want to ruin the iron or wreck the ironing board. So a little bit of care, but yeah, better get on with it really so I can get on with the actual sewing. But now that I've got everything interfaced, pockets and collar pieces and cuffs, that's all done, so all nice and stable. It's had a whole day to basically go off and to be quite settled, so I'm quite happy that's going to stay on there. So quick look at the instructions and see what I've got to do next. I've also done a test sew on this from a scrap. I've just done some stitching on there just to see how this material sews up, so hopefully I've got a good idea of how well it's going to work, and didn't seem to be any dramas there. I did have a bit of an issue with my tension, so I had to play around with that a little bit to make sure that the tension is just right, but seem to have got it all right now, so hopefully it'll sew well. Let's have a quick look at the instructions anyway. Now, obviously I've done this top before, and the first part of the instruction tells me to do the pocket. Now, the pocket's a bit odd because I don't quite like the way it's done, even though it does seem to work, so let's have a quick look at the pocket. Now I've done 2 pockets because I'm going to put one on either side, left and right at the top. It only gives this as one pocket on top left, I think, on the pattern, but it doesn't stop you from putting more pockets on if you want. So I'm going for 2 on this particular one. Now, having done the interfacing piece, I've got that, and what it tells me is there's a fold line, and I've marked the fold line on there, but the interfacing piece is a little bit longer than that fold line. The interfacing comes to here, but my fold line is here, so I'm supposed to, according to this, fold over to the fold line like so, supposedly. Get that on there, try and do it neatly, I suppose. Well, yeah, I suppose that's neat enough, isn't it? Mind you, neat enough sometimes isn't good enough. Sometimes you do need to take a little bit of time to actually get it neat. And it shows it's folded it over like that, so it's now folded over with the interfacing tucked underneath. And then it says fold pocket facing on fold line to right side and stitch each side with facing. So what they seem to mean is that I then take this piece that I folded that way and face it back again, but this time with it being, it's easier to do it this way, like this, so that this meets up the top of the facing like so. Well, that's the way it appears to me that it's telling me to do it, which again is a bit fiddly, so hopefully that makes sense. And then I've got to stitch along the sides here, I suppose at what is meant to be the seam allowance. Now I've not given as much seam allowance on the pocket as I have on the rest of the top, because I've increased the seam allowance. Well, now that I've actually stitched the side bits up and just trimmed the corners, now all I've got to do is take this where it's folded over onto the front and literally turn it in that way to form the top, and in doing so I create this little call it crease line, a fold, so that gives me my fold width for the rest of the pocket that forms the inner bit of the pocket, and all I've got to do is fold it in, press it down all the way around, so I've got that nice edging all the way, and then stitch across there. Now I know that the way I've done this top piece is actually not quite as it shows on the actual instructions. I'm pretty sure after a few tester pieces that I've done originally that this is not quite the right way, but for me I've just found that this is the best way to do it, to get this this top section to have the stiffness and rigidity, and hopefully the longevity from putting things in your pocket that that it'll give me, rather than having a singular piece with just a bit of backing on there. Yeah, it's not quite right according to the instructions, but that's the way I've been doing it, and that's the way I quite like doing it. So better get these pockets properly sorted and ready to go on the garment. Got 2 pockets ready to go, so all I do now is to actually place them on the front piece. Now on the actual pattern piece it does have markings, so you can mark on the top, which is what I've done, and all I've got to do now really is just basically place it up to my marks, pin it down, get it nice and flat, a bit fiddly, get in there, but basically pin this down and then stitch it, but stitch it very close to the edge, as close as I can without running off the edge, I suppose, and then that'll be pocket on. But it is a bit fiddly, I know it's going to take a little bit of time to get that on nice and straight, but these guide marks, if you get these guide marks put on the actual front piece before you get started, then they really do help. Because now I've got my pockets on, one there, one there, not that you can see them very well, I mean blue pocket and blue material. Let's see if I can get this a bit closer. See, there we go, a blue pocket on there, quite nice, with a nice full stiff edge makes the pocket more useful rather than it flopping about. Let me see if I can get the light on it. And as you can see, hopefully, yeah, the stitching I've managed to get quite close to the edge, and I've stitched across there once I turn the pocket the right way round and done that edge, and then when I've sewn it on, as you can see, hopefully that does show that I've got it as close as I can to that edge, make it look nice and neat. So there we go. With the pockets now on both the front pieces, the next stage, let's have a look, says to do what is the buttonhole section on these two front pieces. Now this is really quite a nice little easy part to do, because what you've got, instead of having to put in an extra piece on the edge, you know, like is it a placket piece or whatever you might call it, to make the buttonhole, what you've got are two marking points. What we're going to do is literally take this edge, fold it over, iron that down, and then turn this edge again in to that first crease, iron it down, and then stitch along there, and that will form the a double layer, or triple layer actually once it's done, that makes the buttonhole piece and where the buttons go, and that's done on both sides. So it really is a very straightforward way of making that, I don't know, placket piece or edge strip, whatever it's called might be, for that to go on there without actually having to add another piece. It's integral to that part, so that should be quite a quick and easy step. Do need to get the iron out again, and believe me, it's warm today, very warm. And there it goes with the little button part. It's really simple. It is literally just folded over and stitched along that seam, and gives this nice long, nice straight three layered piece that will then have the buttonholes or the button stitched to it, whichever side is which, and that's really simple. So simple that is, just to be able to do that, but without having to add another piece of material onto this edge. Now the next part that it says to do is actually starting to deal with the yoke. Now I've made an amendment to my top. On the back piece I've put in darts. My back piece is here, and I've got it marked up, not that you'll really be able to see the little marks, the only little dots on here, one on either side. I've decided to put a little bit of tailoring into this just to give it a bit more shape on the back, but that is not on the original instructions. That's not there. This is just something I'm adding, partly because I want to be more familiar with doing these full length back darts in a garment. I've only done it a few times, not really had much experience, but I'm going to put these in here as extras, so it's not in the instructions, so I better get on with it and see how that sits, and then I can get back to the instructions to where it says doing the yoke. Well, I've put my darts in the back here. I say they're unofficial, these are just extras that I wanted to put in, so I've not covered that really. But next part is the yoke, and now it tells me that this is right sides together with the right side facing up. I've got to put this one behind the back piece, and I've got to pin that in with this one with effectively right sides together with the back piece on there. So I've got to pin that up and then just stitch across it. The yoking, or should I say step one of the yoke, because that's the back piece, and then we'll have the front bits to do. Well, I now have my yoke attached to my back piece, and I've stitched it, pressed it, even tidied up the seam edge, which it doesn't tell you to do on these instructions. It doesn't tell you about finishing off any of the seams, but I decided to, even though it's tucked inside. And what I've ended up with, as I've done it right, well, I hope I have, these two pieces, both the yokes, now actually match up there, so I've obviously got it in the right position, which is brilliant, and that's now on the back of the garment. The instructions now tell us to put the front pieces on, and this is where it gets a little bit more tricky, I suppose. There's a little bit of fun involved in putting the front pieces on. So let's have a look at how they actually go on, because it's well, I suppose not tricky, just a little bit cumbersome to get that sorted. Well, now I've got my first front piece. I've got to make sure I get it the right way so that the centre point is in the centre. But before I pin it on, what I want to do is just to separate these two pieces, the two yokes, and then get and line this up and pin this onto here. But now I've got effectively the shoulder seams pinned together, the front piece to the back yoke, but it's a double layered yoke. So now what I've got to do is I've then got to take this piece, which is my front bits, sort of wrap them up, as it were, like this, then roll my back piece up, so I've got this nice rolled up piece, because then I need to bring the other yoke up to meet this one, and then I've got to pin this in place. So I have 3 layers, both yokes and the shoulder seam for the front pieces. So then I just pin this up and then stitch along there, and then it'll be some sort of weird turn through to make it all come out in the right shape. Well, having stitched up my yokes, done the back onto the back piece, and then put the 2 front pieces on the shoulder, stitched along, got that all done. I now have this strange roll piece with everything buried inside my yoke. Now the instructions, it says turn right side out. Now it tells me to do one side and then the other. Okay, it might be slightly simpler to do that, I don't know. Didn't try it that way, just went straight on and did 2 like that. So now I've got to get all of this bit out. So the way I found to do it, and even though it doesn't quite work neatly, but it gets the job done, is to go in the middle here, where I put everything in there. And I'm literally just going to now try and pull everything through. And on the other side. And as I do that, the yoke sort of turns itself the right way through. And what I end up with is a yoke that's the correct way, 2 front pieces and the back piece. So that is now all come through. Better get the right way around, because that's actually the inside, that's the outside. And to make sure I'm doing it right, yes, my darts are inside, my pockets are on the outside, and my yoke is all nice and neat. Well, I'm glad that went quite straight, because I wouldn't want to have undone that and have to redo it, because I imagine that would be a bit of a pain in the backside. I suppose I could now press these seams and then decide whether or not I want to do the top stitching along here and along the back. Next in the instructions is to start doing the collar piece. Now it's 4 parts, or say it's 2 parts really. You've got the collar stand and the collar piece. Now it does say on here in the instructions about putting some interfacing on, of which I've done. Now I've put interfacing on 1 piece of the collar, and I think if I've read it right, I only need to put interfacing on 1 piece of the collar stand. But I want the collar stand to stand properly, so just to give that collar stand more rigidity, more stand as it were, I've put interfacing on both pieces. Not quite sure how well that's going to work, or whether it's going to be over stiff on that collar piece or not, I don't know. I'll have to see how it goes. But I have only put one piece of interfacing on the collar. Now the instruction says pin upper collar to under collar, that's this bit to this bit, or this bit onto that bit, I don't know which one they call the upper and under, right sides together, stitch and stitch ends and outer edge along there, outer edge, trim corners, turn right side out and press. And then it says top stitch collar close to edge. Again, it wants me to do this top stitching. Not sure if I'm going to do that yet or not. I did in the end top stitch the yoke because I decided I wanted to. I thought it might look alright on there, and it has. It's come out alright, but I'm not sure whether I want to top stitch this collar. But so anyway, next bit is to pin this on here, stitch it up, trim the corners, turn it through, and that's the collar part right done. And then it's onto the collar stand. But I've got the actual collar bit done now, and I did do the top stitch on there. I suppose might as well, you know, try and make it look all nice and neat. What I've got to do now is now attach this to the collar collar stand. So I've just got to match up my marks like that. Now because this has got a slightly different curvature to it, and these have both got interfacing on, getting this to line up is going to be a bit tricky. I imagine it's going to not want to work very well, but I'll get it there. I'll make it sit because it has to, and then put the other one on the other side, so I then have a sandwich, as it were, of material creating that collar stand. And then I just have to stitch along here to seam up that or stitch on that collar stand onto the actual collar. Well, here's my collar with collar stand all done. That will fold down like that, all ready to go. And now that I've got that all together, I can start looking at putting that onto the shirt, onto the garment. Well, I'm now just attaching this collar to the actual shirt, to the top, and it's a little bit tricky trying to get this to fit on this very curved neckline, and it is, but I've managed to get it on there. Now on the instructions it actually says pin the right side of collar stand of upper collar in brackets side without interfacing, but I put interfacing on both sides, that doesn't matter to me, to wrong side of neckline. So in other words, what's the inside? So we're doing the inside of the neckline first, then I'm going to turn it out and do the outside. But yeah, matching centre back notches for shoulder and ends of stand to edges of fronts. Stitch. I'll give them stitch. So now that I've got the collar stand and collar actually onto the actual shirt, I'm quite pleased with that. It's quite well, really. There are still a few minor issues. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but this is the best one that I've done so far. It's gone on the nicest, as it were. Little issue over here, nearly puckered up, and one or two things, but yeah, overall I think my skill at doing these collars and putting them onto the shirt is getting better each time that I do it, and I'm getting more and more happy with the way it's going on. What have I got next? Next up on the instructions is actually moving on to the sleeves. So on the sleeve, what I've got to do now is there's a sleeve slot. I've got to cut that sleeve slot and put on the sleeve facing for that slot or slit, whatever it is. So that'll be my next task, of which it's a little bit of a I don't know, I can only describe it as goofy. Well, I've got my first sleeve here. Don't know if it's left or right, I'm not sure, it doesn't matter really, but I've got my slot put in where the cuff slot is meant to be, and a quick read of the instructions tells me that it says pin right side of sleeve slit facing to wrong side of sleeve slit opening. So this slit piece, I've got the other one here for putting onto the, almost like a facing piece, isn't it, for this slot, for this slit slot, whichever way you want to call it. And on the instructions I've done that, and then it says, and just to create a little bit of confusion here, using a 3mm 1/8 seam allowance, which is hardly nothing, stitch from one end, this end, to 3mm past the top of the slit. So I've got to stitch to 3mm, accurately past this by 3mm. 3mm. I've got to stitch up to that point there. And then I've got to pass the slit, lower needle, turn fabric and stitch other side. So what it shows is that you've got to do that 3mm past the slot, turn, manipulate the piece so you end up with a straight edge, and then sew the rest of the way down. The rest of the way down before you turn it over. But this means getting this edge here to be a straight edge once you've gone to that point there. So there you go. I've got these cuff slit bias piece, or I don't know what you call them, facing pieces on initially, and there you go. Quite simple. Well, no, actually it wasn't simple. It was like pain in the backside trying to get this to manipulate it to come back to form a straight and to stitch down there to make it all nice and neat. It's not easy. The first one I did, I started going, didn't make a good job of it, so I had to unpick it and I've redone it, and even now I'm not totally pleased with the way it looks, really, because it's just such a pain in the backside to get this done. Next stage is going to be even worse, because what I've got to do now, so I've got to fold this over, I've got to fold this bit down like you would with a facing piece, and then fold the whole thing over again like you do with facing to get it to form the cuff facing piece on this slit. It's going to be very fiddly, and it's going to take time. So a lot of patience I think it's going to be needed with that bit, and my experience when I've done it before is yes, it took ages and it takes some patience. So here goes to testing my patience. So to put this in perspective, I suppose, have a look at the details of it all. What it seemed to be telling me is that I've got to take this piece where the slit is. Now this is the right side and that's the wrong side, and it's been stitched to the wrong side on the inside, as it were. I've got to open this out like that, nice and long. I've then got to turn this over, so I've got a 6mm seam allowance turned over there, and then I've got to then turn this over again with this seam forward, so that this then comes over the top and covers up the stitching of where it's stitched from the other side, and then stitch close to the edge, which basically is like doing bias tape. Pretty much that is what it is, but it's just a bit fiddly. So first of all I need to iron this seam flat, I need to iron this seam over, then turn it over and iron that seam down so it sits in place before I pin it, before I stitch it. Hopefully that's nice and clear. Well, two cuff slots later, I managed to get them done. What you end up with is this. Now this one I've just pinned it together so it stays shut, because I've yet to do these pleats, a couple of pleats on either sleeve. But this one, basically what you get is this side is turned over and they meet like that, and then when you put these two pleats in, that will hold this one in, this particular one in place that way. But that's how it sits. That's the facing piece for the cuff slot or slit, however you want to. Well, now the fiddly bits are done on my sleeve, I can now attach the sleeve and the sleeve head onto the actual main garment. So I've got to sew this on to there in a particular way, or at least that's how it looks in the instructions, of which seem to tell me something a little confusing. Pin sleeved armhole, right sides together, matching notches for shoulder, notches on front and back, and armhole edges, stitch. The thing is though, the picture is not what I'd be expecting. Let me see if I can get this on there. That's the picture for it. But what it seems to be showing to me is, even though it says right sides together, it's showing this, which is the inside of the garment, and the right side, which is the wrong side, and the right side is here. And what it seems to be showing is that I've got to take this, then take this part and turn it over slightly to match up the my notches and marks to match this up, which okay can work because we're talking about a curvature that's that way and a curvature that's that way, so they'll meet, but it's not the way I'd normally do it. Normally I would do it this way. I would start with my main garment with right side facing up, and this is the right side of my sleeve, and then I would match it like this from this side. So match that notch, pin, and then pin round until I match up these two knots, and then continue round until I've done it all. Yes, I'm pulling the material and the sleeve into position. That does make it quite difficult, but that's the way I've done it, whereas the way they're saying to do it is a little odd. I might try doing one that way just to see how it goes. Perhaps it might work out better, but it's not the way I'd normally do it. I'd normally do it like this: face side up, facing side down, pin on, and then work it out to get it all to line up. So let's see how that goes. Having now actually stitched that sleeve in there fairly successfully, really, I think, myself, come out quite nicely. I did pin it the way that I prefer to pin it, and not the way it showed in here on the instructions, but that's fine, it seems to come out alright. And the 15mm seam allowance is much better because I've got a lot more to play with. Now the thing here on the instructions, it says press seam allowances toward front and back, so I presume it's like this, but shows it that I'm pressing it in to the actual garment. Here's the collar, so I'm pressing it in that way. And then it says, and top stitch close to seam. Repeat for other sleeve. What it doesn't say though, is it doesn't say about finishing the edge on this seam. It says nothing about that. It doesn't say about overlocking or zigzag or anything. It just says you have to press it and then stitch it. So from the outside, from the side that's seen, you'll have an over stitch, top stitching row that you'll see. But what do I do with this seam? Having spent a little bit of time getting this prepared and tidying up this seam, which it says nothing about, again I must mention that it says nothing about finishing this seam, I've managed to get it in there and cut it down and then turn this over, and then I've stitched close to it. So on the inside you get this turned over but neat edge, it's not going to fray out. On the outside, the side you are going to see, you end up with that. So with this sort of, there's the seam and then another line of stitching, and that holds it all in. Actually adds probably quite a bit of strength more into that seam, which is brilliant. So we've got a stronger seam for the shoulder, for the arm piece that's in there, but also a nicely finished seam on the inside. And there you go, all done. Well, nearly. At least I've got the sleeves on, but there is still quite a bit to do. Now, on the instructions, it actually says the next thing to do is to actually do the hem. Now, because I've changed this pattern and I've now got a straight hem rather than the curved one that it says, I'm going to leave the hem till pretty much last as far as the main parts go. So next, after that, it tells me to do the underarms. So the side seam and the underarm that stitches all that together, that gets stitched in now as the next stage of sewing on both sides. So then that then really brings in the full shape of what I've got, and pretty much gives all of the big seams done, with the exception of the hemming. And then after that, I've just got the cuffs to finish off. So next, these two big seams, side seam and arm seam, and that'll give me a lot more structure and shape in the actual garment. Well, as you can see, it is nearly done. I've finished off the, let's take these glasses off a minute. I've finished off the seams for the side and arms. That's all come out quite neatly. I've actually done the hemmed that up, nice couple of little turns, and actually, even without being quite finished, I love the room. I put the little darts in the back because I felt it just needed taking in a bit, and you know what, it just seems just lovely. And this is actually down a size from the original that I'd first done my mock-up of, because I'd done that in large, I think, whereas this is now in the medium, and it actually fits really, really well. The only thing left to do now, as you can see, cuffs, got to get my cuffs done, and then my buttonholes, and finish off that. And other than that, it is all but done. I think I've managed to get the pockets on evenly. I think they sit at about the right level. They're not one up and down or all over the place. I mean, usually when I've tried putting pockets on, I've got one there and the other one like off at an angle somewhere else. But no, I seem to have got that quite straight, and I really like that. It's really quite nice. But just need to finish off now by cuffs and buttons, and then I can really have a proper look at it. Well, it would appear that I'm almost there. I've got the penultimate thing to do, which is the cuffs. Now, the cuffs is 2 bits of material with some interfacing that I've already put on after following the instructions. Now, I put the interfacing on ages ago, as I said before, so I can make sure that it's on there nicely and stabilised, and it's not going to suddenly peel off. Well, hopefully not. Now, on the instructions, I'll just give it a read. Glasses. Right. Fuse interfacing to wrong side of cuffs. Fold cuff in half lengthwise. Right sides together and stitch ends. Sounds simple. What that means, I suppose, is to take this, turn it in half, like that. Bit fiddly, and then the interfacing is long enough that it will actually lip over, and then I've just got to stitch down the edge, the short edge there, stitch down there so it holds it in place. But I finally got both my cuffs on, and they seem to have come out quite well. Quite like the way that they look. Now, I didn't bother filming the insertion of these cuffs. I was getting to, but I just wanted to get them on. But what I am going to do is I'm quickly going to go over how these actually go on. So start off by turning this, I'll turn this one through, and that's how you start. You start with this wrong side of material, and then you get this cuff which actually sits on the edge like that. So you place it up to it that way, and then you open this up because this will be open, and you get this side and this part together, but it is in that sort of line, and then you have to stitch inside. Turn that down once you've got it all lined up and stitched, and then turn the sleeve the correct way through. And what you'll have is now have an open gap this side, but then you have to turn up the seam allowance, so you turn it in, pin it down, and then effectively like a top stitch over this end, and what you end up with is a stitch line that's near the edge there, and a stitch line that's fairly near the edge on the outside, and that seals it all up, makes it all nice and neat. Well, I'm now looking through my big bundle of buttons, which actually isn't that big really. I've just got this bag I keep them in, but now I've got to decide what sort of button I'm going to go for. I've had a look through here and I've come up with a few selections. So I've got a choice of either clear or white. And like I say, I've got plenty of both, so it's not like I haven't got enough for the job, because I certainly do. But I've just got to decide which one I want to use, white or clear. And the white give a good contrast, but the clear, I do like that clear. I'll have to have a little mull over that. Well, my top is finally finished. There it is, all nicely done. Just need to actually wash it. Only a bit of pressing and washing. It is a polycotton, so hopefully it'll be nice and stable. Just remember not to iron it on too high a heat. But yeah, all done and all finished. And that was actually quite an enjoyable sew, really. I took my time over it, and I've done several reincarnations of this top. I've done it a few times, I suppose, as practices and mock-ups and ways of being able to get this top to be right, so that I can make sure that this one that I've just done is as I want it to be. Now, there are still a few bits and pieces that aren't quite right, but considering this is my fourth top, and actually those little bits and pieces aren't that bad. They're just minor things that, as I've been sewing, I've noticed the little things where I'm making slight mistakes or errors. And I think as I do this top more and more, I think, yeah, this is actually going to work out as a really nice top to sew, because now I've got it how I want. What else do I need to mention? Well, the instructions. Now, the one thing about the instructions is that, let me get the main package for this Kwik Sew 355, is that as clear as the instructions are, they're not overly detailed. I mean, if I open it out, you've got this, which has all got the instructions on, but also tells you about the cutting and everything. And then on the back, you've only got this bit, so it doesn't fill it up. You know, I just feel the instructions could be a little more comprehensive, go into a little more detail, of which they don't, which makes it slightly trickier at one or 2 points to actually get and, you know, make the top. I think the main thing that I've actually changed on this out of everything is when I've redrawn my pattern pieces for the size I was doing. Now, I did start doing large. The first couple are in the large size, but this blue one is actually in medium. But what I did was to add more seam allowance. So the pattern does actually have 6mm seam allowance as normal. That's its standard seam allowance. But to me, I never felt that was quite enough. I wasn't able to finish the seams off very well with that 6mm seam allowance. So I actually redrew it and put a 15mm seam allowance, which is standard. You know, it's that 3/8 of an inch. So is it 3/8 of an inch? I don't know. I don't work in the metric, in the imperial much. I normally work in the metric, so 15mm to me, and that's actually allowed me to construct it better without feeling that I've got this very narrow seam allowance that I'm working with. On the actual pattern, it's only 6mm. So if you feel like actually redrawing it and putting in a 15mm seam allowance, I would do that for definite, because it made so much difference to bringing this top together to make it work and to look a lot neater. I think it's come out lovely. So all in all, an enjoyable sew. I've learnt from doing it, and I look forward to making some more, because it isn't the end. I've actually bought some material which was some duvet covers that were in a sale, so they were reduced, which was a king size and a super king size, which is lots of material. It's a Polycotton, so I'll be able to make quite a number of these. I'll probably can make somewhere in the region sort of 8 or 10 of these, and then I've got a whole load of sort of standard, as it were, like everyday shirts, work tops that I can wear that are going to fit me because I've made them to fit me, and I'm going to like them because I've made them just for me. So that's brilliant. Everything you could want from doing your own sewing, isn't it, really? So there you go. Kwik Sew 3555. Says here Mrs. Shirts. So there you go. Give it a go, I'd say. How hard can it be? Well, thank you for watching my video. I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye.